Hi, everyone. I'm Aurora from ELA. Thanks for joining us today. While we're waiting for folks to trickle in, take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us your name, the organization you work for, and your role at that organization. Before we start, I'm going to go over some housekeeping items so we can all enjoy today's presentation. The first thing you may have noticed me doing is identify yourself when speaking. Saying your name before you speak helps participants who can't see the screen follow along with the conversation. Feel free to use this chat function if you want to ask a question or add comments during the presentation. You can also find on the drop-down menu in the chat to directly message the host or panelists if you want your question to be answered offline, or if you don't want your question to be seen by all attendees. We have closed caption enabled for this meeting, and you can turn yours on or off by clicking on the box that says CC in your control bar. So this live transcript will be running, capturing what we're saying, and available for us after the meeting. I will email that out to everyone. You can drag and drop the box that contains the live transcription anywhere around your screen, so you can adjust it for your preference without affecting anyone else's. You may have noticed that we're recording this session. We do this so it can be shared and archived on ELA's YouTube page and referenced in the future. Sensitive information or personal stories will be edited out before we share the final recording. And there may be links and emails, resources, all kinds of stuff like that shared in the chat. And as I said, after the webinar, I will send a follow-up email with all that information to all of the participants and registrants. So don't feel like you need to hurriedly take notes unless you want to. So welcome to today's webinar, Prioritizing Inclusive Technology Practices for Student-Centered Learning, hosted by the Educating All Learners Alliance, or ELA for short, and the Center on Inclusive Technology and Education Systems, or CITES for short. My name is Aurora Jegger from ELA, and I'll be your host. Before we dive into today's content, I'll share some info about ELA. We are a coalition of organizations dedicated to producing and sharing resources, programs, and events just like these, dedicated to supporting students with learning differences. And with us today from CITES are Christine Fox and Maggie Pickett, and they'll be telling you a little bit more about their organization in a few moments. So I'll pass it over to you, Christine, to start today's presentation.
Well, thank you. And thank you to ELA for having us today. Excited to be here. We do have a bit.ly that I'll ask that can be put in the chat, where we have resources that are directly aligned to the information that we're sharing today. So with that, we will jump in. I'm excited to be here. So first and foremost, CITES is housed at CAST, and CAST is a nonprofit organization based out of Massachusetts, and we are focused on accessibility and UDL, and you may know CAST as the authors of the Universal Design for Learning. But with that, we have a commitment to accessibility. And so the resources that we share with you and that we are a part of, we focus on the accessibility of that content. And you can see here, there's some simple terms, an acronym we use, POUR, to make sure that the content is perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And so we like to model and practice what we preach when we're creating our presentations. Also, all of the content that we provide is openly licensed under Creative Commons, and therefore we encourage you to remix and reuse, and we do ask just for attribution. So I'll jump in and tell a little about myself, and then my colleague Maggie can introduce herself. So my current role is Senior Technical Assistant Specialist and Project Director for CITES project. My background is in education, from classroom teacher and curriculum coach, and I spent the bulk of my career in education technology, focused on supporting opportunities for digital teaching and learning. I've been with CAST about a year, and prior to this role, I was on the CITES Advisory Board as well as the AIM Center Advisory Board, and I was actually part of ELA representing my previous organization. So I also am excited to introduce my colleague, Maggie Pickett, who has expertise around accessibility and assistive technologies in her background. Maggie?
Hi, thanks, Christine. So I'm Maggie Pickett. I'm a Senior Technical Assistant Specialist at CAST, working primarily on the Center on Inclusive Technology and Education Systems. CITES, but also working on the National Center on Accessible Educational Materials, the AIM Center. As you can see by the letters behind my name there, I am a certified speech language pathologist and turned AT specialist, turned digital learning coach, and have done a million things in between. So I'm really excited to be here with you all today.
So our objectives really are, and we like to set the stage of the fact that we want to first and foremost identify the CITES framework areas so you have a better understanding of CITES itself. We're going to hyper focus on the teaching practices, and that's what we focused on in the description and the title of student-centered learning. So we're going to take the opportunity for you to be able to complete a self-assessment around student-centered learning, and that way you can kind of engage in some of the resources that are available through the CITES framework. So just take a moment and share in the chat, what is your goal for today?
And Christine, while folks are getting their goals identified for today, I did just want to remind people that the bit.ly has been put into the chat, and that is our handout for today. That handout has a number of the links that we'll be talking about all right there on one document. It also has a link to the slide deck, so if you'd like to follow along there, you can do so. So please use the bit.ly to navigate there.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the reminder. So I see, looks like the opportunity to simplify technology for students, and then supporting district AT coordinators. And we're happy to address those issues, and hopefully others will be putting their goals for today. So we make sure to highlight as we best can how CITES can support your work. So the Center on Inclusive Technology and Education Systems, CITES, is a federally funded grant. We are a technical assistance center funded by the Office of Special Education through the U.S. Department of Education. And this project started in 2020. So as you can imagine, it was a challenging, slight bumpy road in the beginning, but we are coming around, starting our fourth year, December 1st. Our last year, sorry, December 1st. So that we can pull all of the information and content together in supporting schools and districts. The goal of CITES, as you can see here, is really about inclusive technology systems. And so how can we have those ecosystems created and to the benefit of all learners is being purposeful about collaboration between AT, assistive technologies, ed tech, and then IT as well. In the districts we've been working with, sometimes all these folks are already working together, and in other times they haven't even met each other. And so our goal is that the district leaders, a change in mindset where breaking down silos, all of the folks supporting students with disabilities can then provide support for the student's device, the accessibility features, any assistive technologies that are needed. So this graphic here is really an opportunity to show what we're talking about and where things typically are in a district or a school right now, the current reality, and then our goal for a collaborative system. And you can see that the balls of clay are each an entity to themselves, and they're sitting alone and not connected at all. And in many cases, this is the reality of a school district. But then our ultimate goal is that there's a complete blend where all of the divisions, the communities, the teachers, the students, the families are all collaborating together so that there is a shared vision and collaboration across a school or district. So with that in mind, we're going to try to really pull some things out of you. So I encourage you to leverage the chat today. I know you can't unmute yourselves on a webinar in Zoom, but we do want to hear from you. So tell us about this graphic. What might resonate with you as related to your school, your classroom, or your district? And then maybe what questions might you have about it? And we hope that not everyone is over here with all separated divisions, but we also know that across the country, we're not really to this cohesive, blended, cooperative environment that we may prefer to have, that we would prefer to have, and we're probably not there yet in most places. So now I'm going to share a little bit about the CITES framework itself. First and foremost, it was based off of the National Education Technology Plan of 2017. You may be aware that the National Educational Technology Plan, the NETP, is actually just been awarded to a group of organizations that will be making revisions to that 2017 National Ed Tech Plan. But with that being said, CITES purposely used that document as a guide and believe that our framework enhances the work that was already in the stages that were set in the NETP. And with that, the framework areas that we have align directly with the NETP. So we focus in on leadership, infrastructure, teaching, learning, and assessment. And for each of these areas, we provide practices related to students with disabilities and how schools and districts can support them. And then we also provide action steps. And I'm going to dig into that a little bit when we share the website shortly. In addition, we know that for all students, whether or not they have a disability, families are at the center. And so family engagement is another one of the practices and areas of the framework. With that, we are sprinkling best practices and action steps for schools and districts and educators throughout the framework so that families are really seen at the forefront of being involved in this process. And so the framework development, we didn't pull all of this out of thin air. Apart from being based on the National Ed Tech Plan, we also focused for each of those areas that I mentioned, leadership, infrastructure, teaching, learning, and assessment, as well as family practices. We conducted a literature review. So we have a variety of resources and details on what the literature and research says. We conducted a landscape analysis. So we worked with districts across the country that could provide examples where things are working and they are leveraging inclusive technology practices. And then we're working with a cohort of framework development districts, which I'll identify in a moment. And those districts implement the practices and then they work through them, then with a pre and post self-assessment. So they're giving us feedback on how we can develop and refine the framework. So here's a map that shows our framework development districts. So the lighter yellow are the districts that we've been working with intensely, what we call targeted technical assistance in the federal grant world. The lighter colored are the districts that we've been working with over time that participate in trainings with us and cohort meetings and conducting those pre and post self-assessments. And then the darker yellow are states where a district may have provided some input and given us a knowledge base, and we may have written up a short vignette or a case story about their work or inclusive practices. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and go out to the CITES website, and that way I can show you some of the information in action. And you can see here, it is a user, I believe it's a very user-friendly website. It is accessible, which is also very important. I'm going to put the link in the chat as well. And then I will show you the highlights of the framework. So for each of the topics or areas, we have specific, we have an overview. Let's start with the simple. And then specific actions, practices that support that particular topic. So for example, in leadership, and then I'm going to definitely jump to teaching, but we say that create a community-wide vision and aligned goals. That is a priority for leadership with inclusive technology practices. And then we have 3 action steps for your district or school to take. If they haven't already, you may already be in a good place for leadership, to engage a leadership team of internal and external stakeholders, create a shared vision, identify goals, and then communicate the shared vision and goals. so across the community. And so you can see here, there's a self-assessment tool in 2 formats, PDF or Word, and then we have resources related to those, as well as a summary of a district where some of this is already taking place. Similarly, for infrastructure, we have specific practices and then action steps related to those. So personalized learning device, we want to hear and see about built-in accessibility features, having family and students involved in the decision-making, ensuring everyone understands how to get the technologies they need, and then provide individualized technologies when necessary. So our goal would be that the devices a district provides include all the accessibility features and are interoperable with assistive technologies from the get-go. But there are times with certain students, they may need a different type of device. So again, we have multiple resources on each of these pages. But I know here today, we're really focused on the teaching. So with that, I'm going to show the examples of the teaching itself and the fact that you can conduct the teaching practices self-assessment. And that way you can see all of the self-assessment practices related to teaching. But if you want to dig in and be a little bit more finite for the students, support student-centered learning, we also have a self-assessment tool there. And Maggie's really going to dig into the self-assessment tool. So Maggie, do you want to talk a little bit about the form itself, or do you want to jump back over to slides?
The form is pretty self-explanatory. I think we can hop into slides and people can kind of follow along with that form if they want. But we're also going to do some of this on the slides over here.
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Maggie.
Awesome. Okay, should be seeing my slides and they should look very similar to Christine's slides. It's so good to be here with you all today. Let's get going. So the teaching practices in the self-assessment, or the teaching practices in the CITES framework, pardon me, are part of, again, that robust kind of knowledge development process that Christine walked us through. And we took all of what we learned about teaching, learning, and assessment, these instructional practices is sometimes how we refer to them, to really create inclusive technology learning environments. And so we've taken these practices and we've pushed them out to the districts that we've partnered with. Those 6 districts from across the country have, just like Christine said, have kind of helped us refine a little bit. We haven't gotten to that refinement component. So the practices that we're going to show today, a year from now, could look very different. So as if you're engaged in what we're talking about today and what we're sharing and some of the tools and products, I encourage you to kind of just come back and revisit the site as you can, as you need, as you want to use the tools and resources. But just every time you come back to use those tools, check that you have the most recent, most updated version, because we will be tweaking based on that refinement process. So let's hop into teaching. So I love this quote. This is something that our team heard educators say. Teaching with technology can transform. I'm sorry, this is from the National Ed Tech Plan. Teaching with technology can transform not only teachers as educators, but it also students as learners. So when we use technology to support inclusive learning opportunities, we're not just changing the way that we operationalize our instruction, but we're really changing the way that students can and do engage and interact and show what they know in those learning environments. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit more and what the practices are that can really allow learners, all kids, to really benefit and grow in their learning through the use of assistive technologies and accessible materials. So what is teaching and technology in an inclusive technology system? Again, we believe that when educators can build their skill sets to use technology, not just to implement instructional strategies, but to really get to the level of supporting the learner and individual learners and providing different supports within the design and the delivery of their instruction, then we can really get to more effective learning process and supporting the learners in that learning process. So it's taking a proactive approach to that design and that delivery by ensuring that we are aligning the use of assistive technologies, accessible materials, maybe accessibility features that are just built into what we're already using, to remove those barriers to learning for students with disabilities. And ultimately, what we're learning from many of our districts is that we're not just removing barriers for students with disabilities, we're removing barriers for a wide range of learners. In fact, we just had a podcast release today. Our partner district, Jenks Public Schools in Jenks, Oklahoma, talked about their approach. So we've been working with them over the last few years. And they were just sharing about the changes that they've seen in students. And after they had talked, and I got to meet with Jenks a few weeks ago, and seeing the different teachers in different roles, English, teachers supporting English language learners and immigrants coming from Ukraine, coming from Afghanistan, using different technologies and tools and strategies that we use in special education to remove those barriers, using those with different populations of students. So I think these teaching strategies and practices might seem just really easy and straightforward, but being very intentional about getting them in place with our teachers is critical. These are the 3 teaching practices on our website. And please do follow along on the website if you can. Because the website will really kind of go into some details that we're not going to get into on our slides. But the 3 practices are develop technology competencies, support student-centered learning, and then enhance technology skills to support all learners. We're going to dive into each of these in just a minute, but we're going to do a deep dive on that middle one. We're really going to focus on how do we support that student-centered learning for students with disabilities in the classroom. So the first practice, and there are actions that educators can take, again, on the website to really kind of get at this practice. But the practice states that building technology competencies offers educators the opportunity to implement inclusive education systems through the use of instructional and assistive technologies in their design process. So it's allowing them to build the skills necessary to use technology and operationalize that technology within their instructional design. So it's learning basically how to use ed tech and how to use assistive tech in their design and in the delivery of their instruction. And again, those actions kind of get into some more detail. We're gonna not go deep into that, but we'll get there. So the third practice under teaching really focuses on building your professional learning network and the way that you take in and build new skills as an educator. It's really talking about how we sharpen the tools in our toolbox, if you will. So once you get all of these competencies, you're learning how to use ed tech, you're learning how to use assistive tech to personalize and design and deliver that instructional tech, or the instruction. It's continuing to learn and continuing to sharpen those tools in your toolbox through webinars, professional networks, those types of things. So we're not going to dive into that today. But what we are going to dive into is really thinking about how we support student-centered learning through the use of assistive technology, educational technology, how we think about mindset and how we think about learner variability. So CITES resides at CAST, the organization that is the home of universal design for learning, and that term learner variability is a key in the universal design for learning framework and part of the way we just operationalize instruction for kids and design instruction for kids. And so thinking about how we plan and design and deliver instruction. But the key component here, beyond thinking about that learner variability, thinking that all students bring something different to the table, and the way we design our instruction really allows students to personalize that learning process, is that it's essential for students with disabilities that we're collaborating with our counterparts, that we're collaborating. If I'm a general education teacher, that I'm calling on my special education counterpart to say, hey, how can we better support these kids during instruction? If I'm a special educator coming to our general educator and saying, hey, how can we partner to make this happen? And in that partnership, hopefully then we can get to a place where we can identify the ways that assistive technologies that are supposed to be used in the classroom that are written into those IEPs are just kind of stuck right in there to the lesson planning and to the design of the instructional opportunities, again, to reduce those barriers for kids. So we're going to get into that concept a little bit more, thinking about and really dive into the actions of how we can really reduce those barriers for kids. So we're going to do a little test first, and this is really where we're going to kind of have some interaction here. So if you would think about in front of you on the screen, there is a scale. On the very far left hand, there is the skill, and the skill states, I can annotate using stamps in Zoom. We're going to flip that, and I'm going to model what it might look like to show good design on the fly here. So you all are no longer going to use the annotation tool. You are going to use the chat feature. I can chat in Zoom. And the next skilled score. So the first skilled score is 0. I have never tried to use chat in Zoom. At this point, after the pandemic, I think that's probably no one's going to be landing on a 0. The next skilled score is a 1. I have explored the chat in Zoom. The next skilled score is a 2. I can use the chat in Zoom. And then 3, I can teach others about the chat in Zoom. So let's go ahead right now. And if you were going to use this scale 0 to 3, where would you place yourself? Now, originally, I will tell you, we were going to use the annotation feature of the stamps, but the webinar didn't have that turned on as a feature today. I know you all know how to use this. 3, thank you. Awesome, William. Thanks, Aurora, Donna. Fantastic. So we'll move along, but you get the concept. So what we've done here is we've taken in the practices, in the support student-centered learning practices, we've taken the actions and we've put them into a scaled score. So it's going to allow you to think about your practice and put that scaled score in. So the practice we really kind of put it at a practitioner level. The self-assessment that's available on the website is more geared toward district leadership and really supposed to be a conversation among district leadership. And we know we're getting more kind of practitioner level folks today. So this is a chance for you to take a glimpse into your practice and say, hey, how am I doing with these? Versus the tool that's on the website is really geared toward kind of those district leads and leadership roles and coordinating folks. If you do find yourself in that coordinating role today, I'm going to ask that you participate in the scaled scores that we have in the slides, but think about maybe an educator that you've been coaching, or yourself maybe 10 years ago when you're in the classroom, or perhaps just somebody that you know that's teaching in the classroom. Put yourself in a place where you're able to use these scaled scores at that practitioner level. And then you can go back if you're in those coordinator management roles and go back and look at the district self-assessment later. Okay, here we go. So the skill, the first one we're going to self-assess is that you prioritize student-centered learning. The skill here is that I prioritize student-centered learning by using technology supports with personalized learning, UDL, or multiple pathways implementation. I'm going to go ahead and go to full screen. There we go. So the point here, again, is that we are really focused on supporting individual learners in their needs and designing learning opportunities in a way that meets students where they are. And so if you have any background with personalized learning or UDL or even blended learning, these types of frameworks, these types of instructional design really do focus on the personalized learning. or student-centered learning. So here we are with the scaled score, and let's do it. 0, I'm going to explain this because if you were here and using a screen reader, you would not be able to see my screen. So I'm going to go ahead and describe these. 0, I don't yet use technology supports to personalize the learning experience. Number 1, I use technology supports or personalized learning strategies, but not both. Number 2, I use technology supports to personalize the learning experience for some of my students. Or 3, I use technology supports to personalize the learning experience for all of my students. So let's break this down a little bit while you guys are kind of thinking about that. When we personalize the learning experience or really focus on student-centered learning, the need here and what we're trying to get at is that you're not only personalizing it, but you're using technology tools, those accessibility features, those strategies, those inclusive technology tools to really personalize the to kind of do this. So let's see where we're at. Lots of 2s. Okay, so we're looking for some of our students. Fantastic. So be thinking about that, and we'll keep moving on. So the next one, same process. This one is to collaborate with special education or general education. So it's collaborating with that counterpart. So if you're coming here today as a general educator, do I coordinate and collaborate with my special education counterpart? And there's some details in the skill. They're going to help us understand if we're doing that. So the skill is 1, I collaborate with my special or general education design and planning. So a 0 is I don't yet work with my counterpart to design learning opportunities. Number 1, I work with my counterpart when barriers arise in the learning process. So if a barrier arises, coming in and addressing it then. Number 2, a skilled score of 2 would be I work with my partner at their request to reduce barriers in the learning process. So somebody's called on me to come in, or somebody's called on me to say, hey, I need to come in, okay? And number 3, scaled score 3 would be my partner and I work to design lessons that proactively plan to reduce barriers in the learning process. So together we are working, we're saying, hey, that's going to be a really struggle for these 3 kids, but particularly this student on an IEP. Let's put this strategy in place, or this assistive technology is going to work for this kid. So let's see if we can get it for these kids as well. So where are we at on this scaled score? If you want to, you could think about somebody who you have supported in the classroom prior. I was just going to say, in my experience, a 1 is oftentimes where we get at. Once we get an inclusive mindset in place where these tools are just part of the environment, and hey, they're available to everybody and no, it's not cheating, we start to see that scale kind of slide up, and wow, we can take advantage of a lot of cool things. Great, thanks for sharing. Really, really helpful. So hopefully this is helping you kind of frame where you or the folks you're supporting are within this process. So the final one, it's taking this a step farther, and it's saying, okay, so we're really focused on student-centered learning. We're really focused on collaborating between general education and special education. This one says, now we're going to ensure that assistive technology is embedded within the design of our instructional opportunities and available for students with disabilities. So the skill, I address the use of AT for students with disabilities in instructional design and delivery. Scaled score of 0 would say, I don't yet consider the use of AT for students with disabilities in instructional design or delivery. 1 would say, I work with my counterpart, my general education or special education counterpart, when barriers arise to implement AT for students with disabilities. So again, if there's an issue in the classroom and the student's AT isn't working, then I'll come in, or my person has me come in and I have to go fix it, right? The next one says, I work with my partner to design instructional opportunities to implement AT for students with disabilities. So I'm helping in that planning and the design component. And a scaled score of 3 would say, my partner and I work to design and deliver instructional opportunities to implement AT for students with disabilities. So not only, and I speak from a special educator standpoint, if you couldn't figure that one out, but it would be me and my counterpart are doing both the designing the proactive planning, but also the delivery in the classroom. So we're both kind of supporting both of those things. Looks like we already have some scores rolling in 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1 to 2, maybe. This one's hard. This almost requires a level of co-teaching to get to a 3. Doing a level, the scaled score of 2 is great. That's really good practice. Hopefully this activity, this little, was a glimpse into some opportunities to think about you or yourself, or perhaps how you're supporting folks in the process of designing and delivering learning opportunities for kids that in ways that meet them where they are and give them the tools they need to be and feel successful in learning. So Christine, I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure. So thanks to so many of you for engaging in the conversation, and thanks to Maggie for adjusting the questions are really focused on practitioners, but you can see these are the kind of things that when you see where you are, then you can reflect on what you may want to try and do. So our question for you right now is, what is your next step? When you think about inclusive technology practices, you can't necessarily change the entire system in your district tomorrow. You can't necessarily change the personalities of the leaders that you work with. So what is a next step that you will take personally around student-centered learning and inclusive practices?
If I'm a practitioner in a school and I want to maybe try to work on some of this, even just going to others in your building, other leadership, the building leadership team, or other folks in kind of more maybe instructional coach positions, to say, hey, could you help me with this? I'd love to maybe work on some of these things and bring the concepts in that way. So I love your state level perspective, even the district level. But I think the same concept that you just shared could definitely be supported at that building level, building leadership team.
The AIM Center, and maybe Maggie, if you don't mind typing, the AIM Center has a lot of information on accessible materials that might be helpful, including some federally funded online resources. And also, if you explore the CITES framework, you can learn a little bit more about accessibility features and assistive technologies as well. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up with a quote from one of our former colleagues, Dr. Joy Zabala, who is no longer with us here physically. However, she is in spirit always. And she really summed up what I think a lot of us believe about the technology. I used to think I was passionate about assistive technology. What I've learned is that I'm very passionate about participation in learning. So it's not about the technology. This is about people's lives, living and learning, and the functions that have to do with that. And that's where the passion lies. And so all of you coming on the call today clearly are passionate about this topic. And, you know, whether it's figuring out a screen reader for one of your students, or how to turn on text to speech or speech to text so they can leverage that content and information. We know that you're out there trying to find all of the great resources available and to ensure that things are accessible from the get-go. So with that, I will tell you, as I mentioned at the top, this is a federally funded center, and we do have to gather data so that we can continue to thrive and drive and create new resources. So if you can, someone will put the link in the chat to the evaluation. Thank you, Maggie. There's also a QR code. We ask you to just take a few minutes to complete the evaluation, because this really helps drive what we do and how we can improve. And with that, we're going to also encourage you to follow cast_UDL on Twitter. We do have a community of practice that meets every other month that has a private Slack channel. So you can join that community of practice and participate in additional dialogue around this topic of inclusive technologies over time, and just pop questions to one another. And then I believe that's a wrap. Official disclaimer, anything Maggie and I shared today is part of this grant. However, we are not representing the U.S. Department of Education. So with that, I'd like to thank Ela and specifically Aurora for engaging with us, reaching out, and we hope and plan to continue this partnership over time.
Thank you so much, Christine, and thank you, Maggie. This is Aurora from ELA. On behalf of ELA and CITES, thank you to the participants today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to show up and show that you really care about this work. Thank you for joining us for this webinar, Prioritizing Inclusive Technology Practices for Student-Centered Learning. You can check out ELA's website at educatingalllearners.org. You could also follow us on Twitter at educateall_org. Also be sure to check out CITES at their website, cites.cast.org. Keep an eye out for an email from me with links and other important information. Please take a few moments to fill out the survey while we're here, and keep your eye out for future collabs between CITES and ELA. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Have a wonderful day, and thank you so much, Christine and Maggie.